Hello and welcome back to the Digital Lounge. My name's Mark Britton and I'm your host for today. Today I'm joined by Crimson's Chief Technology Officer, Oliver Sinclair. Ollie recently published a blog post exploring how AI is moving beyond hype and proving its value through real-world use cases in digital transformation. We're going to delve into the differences between incremental and transformational AI today and how universities and housing organizations are already benefiting and what it truly takes to build AI you can trust, not just deploy quickly. Great to see you again on the show, Ollie. How you doing? Where are you today? Are we allowed to find out?
Yes, I'm good, thanks, Mark. Yes, and an undisclosed location in South London on a client side. So yeah, so somewhere in southeast London.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us today on the Digital Lounge and in our brand new branded studio. So it's lovely to have you here, and thank you for putting together the recent blog post. I wanted to ask first of all about the difference between incremental and
Mm.
transformational AI, because I know when we
Mhm.
talked at the recent innovation conferences, we've talked about starting fast and testing things, but transformational suggests something much bigger and much broader. Can you expand on how organizations should sort of decide between those two and where they should start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the blog was a really interesting one, and I think when we look at how we're dealing with sort of trying to get started with AI initiatives, trying to build this into your strategy, and how that's going to influence where you're going to go from a digital or business transformation element. There's two elements. So incremental is really good to actually start. I see as incremental as building the capability internally and building up that adoption. So it's not going to be fundamentally changing your processes or starting from scratch. You have a suite of processes. You have current pain points. You have things that that are not working very well in your organization. Now those are fantastic areas to target to do some incremental AI to try and improve those smaller type engagements where you can get some quick wins and quick operational efficiencies. The beauty of that is that as an organization, you start to mature, you can understand where you can sprinkle in generative AI or any of the other AI elements and actually gain value quickly. So it may be that it is where there's the shortest path or potentially a lower risk area, and use those incremental wins to actually sort of build confidence in your organization around proving the return on investment, exercising your governance muscles, and really those micro wins become behavioral and data sort of precognitions for the bigger change. So that's when then you get into you've matured in terms of your experience with implementing AI into your organization. Then you can start having a look at really the transformational side of things. And really, there's a lot of detail into this, but to really quickly summarize, we see sort of three lights that need to be green. You've got your foundations ready, so whether that's security, data quality, access controls, etc. You've got the right operating model, which you would have learned from your incremental elements, and then leadership. So your leadership is aligned on measurable outcomes and your risk appetite to be able to implement what we see as transformational AI, which would effectively, relook at your processes and rather than just incrementally change them, actually rip those up and rewrite your playbook effectively and say, well, actually, Microsoft's coined the phrase of frontier firms. Now, when you look at frontier firms, that is really then, how can I fundamentally change this capability that my organization is doing for the new AI age? And that really would be rewriting the process and finding those massive efficiency gains.
Brilliant. And just you talked in your blog about predictive analytics and using unifying data and machine learning to predict that student dropout risk before it happens. What, in your view, have you learned from those projects about what makes predictive analytics genuinely effective versus just another dashboard?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a really good shout, and don't get me wrong, there was a dashboard to it as well. So fundamentally, when we're looking at actually unifying that data, I think the thing that we learned right off the bat was if you have access to your attendance data, your assessment data, all of the engagement activities for a student, as well as the well-being cases that are created, the model sees the full context. And that's absolutely critical, that it sees the full context and not those slices. Because really, where we've unified the data and designed that sort of interventions up front, the universities themselves can flag the dropout risk earlier and target the right support. So it's not just around sort of post actions dashboards to see, you know, the shift in where these things have happened. It's actually, you know, designing the AI solution, designing that predictive analytics, so that there's also the human in the loop. So the idea is that these triggers are going to be again pushed to the right advisors, so that they can see, you know, it's driving a risk score, and it's key to to sort of how they do the trust and adoption side of this, and really can start connecting the dots of what the advisor is actually doing, how that's influencing the risk score, that is pre-calculated. So it's some really good elements to, and we learned loads around how much data, the quality of data, and the combination of all of these different areas is absolutely key. But if you do have that, it's amazing the value, and amazing how quite accurate those predictions and those score metrics can be, and how much of a big impact you can make on certainly just not on the students themselves, but also to the capabilities of how those advisors are helping those students as well.
And I think because you also talked about moving beyond basic chatbots, and it sounds like the kind of information that you're talking about there, pulling that in, is
Mm.
enabling something incredible. I mean, just for our listeners and viewers, you gave the student assistant example where an AI can cross-reference timetables, preferences, and even suggest best study slots. It's a huge leap from that traditional chatbot. So what's enabling that shift from automation to real assistance? And I
Yeah.
think you've kind of partly answered that, but where are the pitfalls, and should organizations, what do they need to avoid if they want to try and personalize at scale like that?
Yeah, good shout. No, it was fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. The shift that we've seen from, you know, the classic chatbots of age to really like intelligent assistants. And if I see that, you know, there's three elements that really change the landscape, and it's the fact that you can ground these chatbots in AI, the data over your organization, so it has access to all of this data, to be able to make those sort of have give reason with real context. The second part of this is the fact that you've got agentic patterns starting to come into these chatbots. Now, I call it agentic patterns. It's effectively, it's not just looking at data and providing a response. So, you know, chat and response. It's actually, you know, having an understanding and being able to action things. So whether that would be orchestrating timetables, or booking out specific resources, or updating records via sort of governed connectors that sit sort of in conjunction with those chatbots. And then the third part is the guardrails that are baked in. So because it is accessing the data and it's accessing actions through predefined connectors, you're effectively inheriting the permission set and the authority there. So there's no, so from a data loss prevention perspective, or from an auditing perspective, you still have the guardrails baked in. So those three elements then allow it to be that massive, you know, intelligent agent that able to not only answers your question, but gives you that productivity as well. The pitfalls, though, there are certainly are pitfalls, and it certainly comes to data. So we always talked, you know, back in the day about shadow IT and about shadow applications. Well, there will probably be a term that might start to come around to this, which is shadow data. Now, this is, you know, assistants, or those chatbots reading sources outside of the specific, the correct data. So, and there are ways in which you can fix that. There's, purview-led discoveries, categorization and labeling around your data is going to be able to minimize the effect of shadow data. But this is something that's going to be really, really key in the future to making sure that we don't fall down those pitfalls. The other pitfall to be aware of is over automation without recourse. Now, if you think about, you need to be able to give users an explain or an undo path to some of those automated decisions. So it could be absolutely fantastic. You've got this chatbot that's giving you advice, but then suggesting you things to do. You're going to need to make sure that chatbot has the right tools to be able to sort of reverse out of things that you didn't want it to do. And that's always one of those considerations when you're building these agents and you're building the autonomy of the agentic patterns. People tend to think of the perfect path and not maybe some of the escalatory paths that you need to go through. So it's all about making sure it's architected really, really well, which is what Crimson are quite experienced in doing now.
Yeah, and I think another example you talk about in the blog is home builders, and you describe how AI can spot cancellation risks for home buyers early and potentially unlock millions in revenue. It's a big problem in the industry that we've talked about before. I'm curious to know though, what signals are most powerful in predicting that kind of buyer behavior, and what do you see as AI doing to change how sales teams intervene with that knowledge?
Yeah, sure. Ignoring the obvious high signal predictors, which should be lower interest rates, right? We always say it, lower interest rates, that just drives the market completely. But looking at specifically in terms of your potential customers, it's going to be around engagement cadence. So very similar to the risk scoring around higher education, engagement cadence and recency of that engagement is really key. Missed callbacks, appointment no-shows, some of these areas are absolutely key in working out, what some of those high signal prediction areas. Chain complexity. So it might actually be the level of detail and understanding you've got for each of those customers. It could be time stalled between reservation to exchange. Some of those, sort of product fit indicators might give us some key elements to this. Now, how AI has changed the intervention is what we can take is all of this information, all of these data, and try to play out based on sort of best practice and policy understanding is how we can do some sort of proactive play calling. So, how we can route to senior agents to offer alternatives before the risk peaks. And that's really, really an interesting way of sort of playing it out. We're kind of using AI in the technology set to play out some scenarios to give the advisors the best course of action, which is absolutely fantastic. And then really it's because there's such a volume in terms of the opportunities or the types of reservations or the types of engagement that you're doing for your customers, it's making sure that there's focus time and being able to cut through the weeds and find those high propensity reservations and tailor the messaging and tailor the advisory services on top of that by whatever features most important, whether that would be affordability, whether it be location, whether it be type of property, etc. So it's trying to utilize all of these different data points and hypothesize that play calling ability, and then getting that conversation in front of the customer as soon as they can. So yeah, really exciting times for decision making in housing for sure.
Brilliant. Now, I don't know whether you saw the story in the news last week about Burger King and them trying to apply AI into the headsets of their users within their restaurants to effectively get a happiness index for the individual and for the restaurant, I'm assuming. Now, there's a huge backlash on that because of privacy and ethics and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, whenever we talk about AI, ethics is a really important element. And I know Crimson's got its own AI trust framework. Can you walk us through what that is? Because this is clearly a very important thing, and a lot of our clients talk about, their concerns around this. How do we make sure this is safe, ethical, and positive to move forward with?
Sure. Firstly, great use case. Certainly for a lunchtime call, Mark. I'm now a bit peckish for a Burger King, so thank you for that. But it's an interesting one because that's a great example of not utilizing something like the Crimson Trust framework, where trust is a design constraint. It's not a retrofit. So you have to consider ethics and trust in general as as a fundamental part of the design. And if you're not doing that, you do then come across these initiatives where it's a great idea, but practically there's so many ethical reasons why you probably shouldn't be doing the things that you're doing, right? Now, Crimson has an AI trust framework based on quite a few reference frameworks. Microsoft being a massive part of that, but we have six pillars of our trust framework, and they're relatively obvious things. You know, it's around security, data quality, governance, compliance, reliability, and ethics. All of those are packaged together and really focused on how the AI works with that. You've got to make sure that there's a multi-layer governance approach, so that you have things like program boards, you have AI governance and ethics groups, but you also have the design authority still thinking about trust and operational governance. So it's not just about, yes, you can design it perfectly, but when it goes into operation, making sure that it's still fit for purpose for when compliance changes or operations changes. But you need to have those assurance gates across the life cycle of your AI implementations or your AI solutions. And you really need to consistently test the value, test the risk, test the quality, the explainability of these AI agents. And there's a lot of things to consider when dealing with that, which is why we had to create a trust framework of our own to make sure that where we're designing or we're helping our customers design, there's at least a kind of a guide to get us onto that. But readiness practices are massive. I think we always start our sort of our discovery and our readiness with things like a sort of a Purdue-led discovery, which is probably something that's really useful from for an enterprise content management perspective, understanding where your data, structured and unstructured, sort of lives and how it's marshaled and controlled. But it's not just about data. There's about the use of it. It's about how practically these AI governance elements would work. And it's always one of those interesting sort of coined phrases where it's like, yes, you can do AI implementations, but should you? And you kind of should ask that asked first. Should you do this before you actually then go and actually go ahead and implement that? So yeah, there's a lot to do with trust and governance.
And I think leading on to that is ideation, and I would imagine a lot of clients, there's kind of analysis paralysis. Where do you start? Lots of ideas. Which ones should you choose to move forward with? Could you, for the benefit of listeners and viewers that may not be familiar with what Crimson does, could you kind of describe some of the workshops that we can offer to help people move forward constructively, I suppose, with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the great thing about Crimson's experience in digital transformation, business transformation, consultancy. We've been in this game a long time now. Yes, primarily been implementing business applications, primarily the Microsoft business applications. But some of these core consultancy sort of muscles we exercise in the AI space now. So we do have AI readiness. So this is around sort of data and documentation. So a kind of like a purview deep dive to be able to understand how we can map sensitive data and labeling and design information architecture so that simple productivity like M365 Copilot and those sort of technology sets can be adopted and rolled out really quickly. But we also have sort of some of the more of the art of the possible use case prioritization workshops where we can actually work with your business to identify some of those incremental elements. So incremental AIs, where to get started, how to prove the return on investment, and get started with some custom AI solutions. And that's why funnily enough, I'm here on client side today, running through some of the use case prioritizations of they've told us our pain. We're very used to receiving and empathizing with pain points around organizations, but now we just have this massive toolkit that we haven't had before to be able to utilize generative AI to fix their problems and have an AI focused solution for them to go at. So there's use case prioritizations. We also do agentic AI sprint zeros. So we can start, if you've already got sort of a team and you've got some prioritized use cases, but you actually don't know how to execute it with the technology, we can come in and help you with that area as well. So there's lots of different things we can do, from discovery and foundation work to really get up and running with a sort of a hybrid team. Not to mention, there's also the trust and the governance boot camp. So we've got governance and trust boot camps, which really we will work with you to establish roles like product owners, data owners, and model owners, and then actually give you examples of what a risk register, an approved prompting, decision logs, and sort of monitoring and data retention could look like if you were looking for some of the governance elements as well. So lots and lots of different types of workshops that we can run with our customers, some of which is funded by my Microsoft initiative, where the licensing is appropriate. So yeah, lots of things that we can do.
Amazing. Ollie, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. You've got loads on today. You've managed to join us on client site as well. So I'm going to leave it there if that's okay with you. It's great to see you, and we'll see you again soon on the Digital Lounge. Thank you. Well, there we go. So if you want to check out Ollie's blog, just search for Unlocking the Potential of AI, Real World Use Cases in Digital Transformation. You'll find that on Crimson's blog. And if you're viewing today, you'll notice that we are mentioning that we've got our AI readiness quiz. That's really easy to quickly establish where you are with AI in your own organization. Just go to assess.crimson.co.uk/AI-ready. That is assess.crimson.co.uk/AI-ready, and that'll take you to our AI readiness quiz. It's a 5-minute questionnaire. It'll give you a very good view on where you are, the maturity with AI, and get you started in the right direction before you may want to reach out to somebody like Crimson. So that's all from the Digital Lounge today, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you very much.